watch it later on. So yeah, let's start off with Bitcoin. So what I believe we've seen, if we look at this on the 4 hour, let me just put this on the 4 hour. So it's kind of an ugly move. I'm not gonna lie, it is a pretty ugly move. We could say that this is an ABC structure. Because we were looking at basically a bounce of some kind. So this is how I see this as an A, a B, and a C. I would have kind of liked the C wave to go a little bit higher. I was hoping that we had reached a 98 to 100k level, and you know, we might still be able to do that. I'm still positively optimistic that we might be able to. You know, if we look at this 4 hour candle on Bitcoin, it looks like we've reacted quite well to it so far. So we touched basically just above the golden pocket 618 region here. And the way I've taken that is by taking the low of this this wave B here, is what I've labeled it as, and to the high here. And that takes us in the region of the 50% and 618 fib level. So you can see we've kind of reached that perfectly here. We've reached a 618. Essentially, we've reached it just below was the 618. And so far we've had quite a really good reaction here. So I would say if we close the candle like this, there's a good chance that we might get a push to the upside. If this entire wick gets eaten up, that normally is a sign that we might get a reversal, just like how you can see down here, where we had this big empty wick. That is usually an indication that we possibly will get a good reversal. Normally, not always, but it is a decent indication that we might. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. We're seeing that we basically touched almost that 618. We've had a good reaction, and we might see further upside. As I said, what I would like to see, and this isn't necessary, but what I would like to see is a push further up from Bitcoin. I think altcoins are also deserving of pushes right now because a lot of them do look pretty grim. But yeah, I mean, you know, we could possibly see this entire move as just a corrective move, a corrective ABC structure to the upside. I won't call this a 5-wave move down at the moment, although, you know, proportionately you could say maybe it is. So if I take a fib from sorry, TradingView has been really janky with me today. I'm not entirely sure what's wrong with it. Right, let's see if that will work. So if we take a fib once it loads from the high here to that wick low, yeah, the 1.382 is an ideal target for a third wave, and you could see a couple of weeks ago when we got to around 80k, around there, we reached that. So this looks like a 3-wave move to the downside. This could be the 4th wave. Possibly I would like to get a bit higher. And then we can get a 5th wave down. Now if we do get that, for me that is possibly a bit bearish, but it could also signal the completion of this wave down as a 5-wave move. But that, as I said, that for me is quite bearish at the moment. I would much have preferred to have got this 3-wave move down, and what I really would expect is that we hold this 80k level. And if we do get a wick below that 80k level, then we don't close above it. We literally just wick below it. We might just touch this 77 74k region, and then we can maybe look at higher, a lot higher. That's kind of the plan. That's kind of what I'm hoping will happen. That's kind of why I've got this maybe a bit of a degen low Bitcoin long that I've set. But I think if you get that entry, that's a really good entry to at least see a bounce. Though I'm just not optimistic on how Bitcoin is looking at the moment. But as I said, yeah, obviously I expected that we get a little bit higher before we might see that push down, and then possibly get a bounce, a much larger bounce from that point. Maybe we would get a 3-wave move up if we do get to this 77k level. So we get to maybe somewhere like here, 105, 107, maybe not even that, and then continue downwards. Because I mean, as I said to you, I don't particularly like looking at patterns, but this does look like a head and shoulder pattern that is forming on the daily. I mean, we could still be bullish as long as that that pink trend line is holding. So it's this trend line here that's basically been holding since the start of the bull run. You can see we touched it here, touched it here. We've not actually touched it since though. We've not touched it since. So, you know, we might get a drop down to that region, that 77k region. We touch that trend line, and then we basically springboard off of it. That is obviously a likely scenario. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next few days, but I think we need to just see what happens. I would, as I said, I still would much prefer to see Bitcoin push up a little bit higher before we even think about going down to 74, 75k. But if we don't get it, we don't get it. It's just how it is. Let's just jump on to USDT dominance, because I did want to talk about this a little bit, because I think it's really important that we all keep an eye on it and not forget that this is probably one of the most important things you could be looking at as a chart. So I've obviously warned for quite some time that USDT dominance looks dangerous. It broke out of the weekly trend line that I drew here that we can see. That breakout happened on the 1st of November. And if we look at this on the 4-hour, you can see that we have a local trend line that we're kind of just watching. We've had a touch, 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 touch. You know, and I think this is going to basically be key. This is going to be very, very key, because we aren't really going to get much of a relief on alts or Bitcoin until we break this local trend line at the very least. So this local trend line is kind of your local downtrend that you're seeing on Bitcoin and your local downtrend that you're seeing on alts. And nothing is really going to change until we basically break this trend line. And if we break this trend line, then, you know, there's a chance that we would retest that weekly trend line that we basically broke. Now, that's why I'm a little bit bearish on everything at the moment, because maybe for the short term, like the next couple of days, possibly maybe even less, we get a bit more downside. I don't expect we're going to get too much more downside, because USDT dominance does look like it's losing a little bit of steam here. But if we do break this, then yeah, I think, you know, alts and Bitcoin will see some form of relief, and we might obviously then, as I said, retest this weekly trend line, maybe towards the end of December, and then USDT dominance might continue to push up at that point. This is obviously all guesswork. I don't know for sure what's going to happen. But this is just based on what I'm seeing. And we can even see a little bit more clearly on the weekly. If we look at it here on the weekly, thing is, at the moment on the weekly for USDT dominance, there isn't any bearish divergence. There's literally no bearish divergence whatsoever. So this is where we need to be very, very careful, because we're not seeing any substantial weakness for USDT dominance. So that's obviously something to bear in mind, and that is obviously one of the most important charts that we could be looking at the moment. So Bitcoin dominance is kind of the same, right? I mean, Bitcoin dominance is what really matters for alts. So you can see obviously we broke that weekly trend line quite some time ago now. It's probably a few months ago, yeah, back in July. And this could possibly be a good move for alts, especially if we see a move down to maybe this area here. I think would be useful, like the 50% area for Bitcoin dominance. But obviously at the same time, Bitcoin needs to hold a few support levels, because if we start breaking, as I said, if we start breaking that 73, 74, 75k region, it's not gonna make too much of a difference in terms of alts. So I think this is just something we need to bear in mind. I mean, obviously, as I said, it was a good thing that we broke this weekly trend for BT dominance. This obviously gives alts a massive chance to breathe and to flourish, but we aren't going to get that if USDT dominance also continues to push up and Bitcoin itself starts to drop. That is not going to look very healthy, and that is not a healthy start to an alt season. Okay. So let's have a look at ETH, because I've looked at ETH. I looked at ETH a few times today, but I've not kind of gone in proper depth over at the moment. So we can see here that Ethereum has basically reached this 618 fib level here. Essentially reached it here, 3,200. And this was basically acting as resistance. You can see that we have like an A, a B, and a C structure. So technically the C wave is complete here. In this three-wave move to the upside. I do see this as the three-wave move, by the way. There is still a chance that we get a additional high. That would probably make it a little bit more bullish. But I currently am not seeing anything for that to happen. But if we do, I would see that as a bullish signal. However, if we start breaking below that previous low there at 2,700, there is a high likelihood that we will visit this region that I've kind of created a long position here for, that I'm going to post in a bit. So there is a good chance we get to 2,300, maybe even slightly below that. You'd preferably want to hold the $2,000 region. But that is basically what I'm seeing if Ethereum can't form one more high. Because then I can class this as a wave 1, a wave 2, a wave 3, wave 4 pullback, wave 5. But if we're not getting 5 waves up, that is obviously possibly signaling that we are going to go much slower if we can't get that final push to the upside. Let's jump onto a few others. So Link, I think Link was a really good one for us, because I'm quite pleased that I, told everyone to not close it out. I kind of wanted to give it more room. I said I was going to give it more room the first time we took this similar trade setup, and I didn't give it more room, and then I didn't give it more room again. But then I was like, okay, cool, I need to just be a little bit more free and really do genuinely give it a bit more room, because I definitely didn't do it this time. But I obviously told people not to close. I didn't close, and it's kind of glad that we didn't close, because our average was like $12.6 and we pushed quite substantially up to around 14, 15, almost $15, I think it was, which was really, really good. Now, for me, I do see this as an impulse. Well, I mean, this was an impulse, and then this kind of turned into something a little bit weird, but then this looks impulsive, which is kind of good. But again, I mean, I still would like to see one more push. Wave 1, wave 2, extended wave 3, wave 4, and then a final push, wave 5. So I would like to see Link go a little bit higher. Even though this looks promising, I still would like to see it go a little bit higher. If we do get stopped out, I'll probably take a similar trade setup. Obviously I'll have the entry slightly different, DCA slightly different, but it will be a similar trade setup, because this trade setup worked so well for Link, and I think Link is quite a good chart to trade, because it's also quite reliable as well in terms of fib levels and support and stuff like that. It respects the technicals and the fundamentals quite well. So I think it's definitely something we'll possibly take up again if we get stopped out, of course. So yeah, I mean, I think Link is looking really good at the moment. I think I'd like to say that we've got the low is in, and maybe we can basically see more upside. You can also see on the daily that we've jumped back over that weekly trend line that we broke, and I was very, very concerned about that. I was very concerned at the fact that we broke that weekly trend line. We did have a candle close outside of it, but if we candle close, yeah, and obviously, the previous candle as well was very close to basically also closing outside of it. You can see the bulls are really fighting here. But, I mean, if we close above this weekly trend line, that might be positive. It might imply that we might get one more push up, maybe to even like $16, a little bit higher than that. But I think we need to see how the weekend goes, because trading on the weekend can be crazy. So yeah, keeping an eye on that setup, keeping an eye on obviously our entry that we have, just in case we get stopped out, but we took some good trims on it. Okay, I'm going to jump to H-bar, because H-bar also looks like quite an interesting chart at the moment. This was, on the lower time frame, this was kind of like a possible setup. We can see that we're kind of, didn't draw this very accurately. We're kind of, if I just put the 786 on here, which is kind of like your last line of support, really. You can see that we basically, Sorry, let me draw this properly because this looks pretty terrible how I've drawn this. Yeah. So you can see that we had this 3-wave move. This is a very obvious 3-wave move. Wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. Then we had an ABC to the downside for wave 4. And now we could be working on wave 5, but as I said, we need to hold this level here. This 13-cent level. Yeah, 13 cents, sorry, I'm being blind. This 13-cent level here we need to hold. And as long as we hold this level, there is a chance obviously we can go higher and possibly break above this previous high here at around 15 cents. If we break below this level though, then that for me is an indication that we're going to reset this low. And this low is not going to be the final low. We're going to go possibly lower, maybe even to 10 cents at this point. Because, and I say that for one fundamental reason, if we break below this previous low, this is not a good sign, because this is acting as our support. You can see we have support here, and we had a touch on support here, touch on support here. So the more touches, the weaker it gets, okay? And if we do break below this level, I would see it very difficult for H bar to get back over it again. It will take a considerable amount of time, considering we have not broken this level for many, many months, over a year, I think. The only time we broke it is when we had this real scam wick on Binance that just scooped up liquidity down here. But that is the only time we've seen this break. So I wouldn't say there's a potential trade setup here, but I think we can keep an eye out for it. So not too much else to say on H bar. Let's have a look at SUI. Seems to be pretty slow today, so just gonna wait a little bit. If not, I'll try maybe reloading it. It does seem really slow. Maybe it's all those liquidations that are taking place. Everyone's freaking out trying to use TradingView. Let's try restart. Okay. Let's try SUI. Yeah, this seems to be taking too long for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why it's taking so long for TradingView to load. Okay. TradingView is not going to load. I might just have to cut this short a little bit. But general consensus, as I said, is we're watching for a reaction from Bitcoin at this point. We've had a good reaction to this support zone at the 618. Or almost at the 618. And it would be good if we can hold above maybe the 90k level for potentially a final push to the upside to 98, 100k tops. So yeah, not too much to say. It's been a bit of a boring week. Not massive amounts of action. I think the only really good trade that we had was that link trade, so I'm pretty pleased that we had that. Everything else stays the same. ICP, I don't think ICP hit the DCA. I need to check, but I think it might have missed it by just a small amount, which is very, very annoying. But I wouldn't be too annoyed even if we get some upside right now. I think it'll be much needed for a lot of traders at the moment, but for me, obviously, I'm quite happy where I am. Not doing anything at the moment, just sitting, chilling, relaxing. Only in ICP at the moment. We've obviously got our Bitcoin long set. I can't remember if I did a fetch long limit, but I need to check because I would like to possibly publish that as well if I haven't done it already. And yeah, I suppose just see how we go. Sweet. Well, thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it. And as always, safe trading. Peace out.